In a post-apocalyptic world, Mallory Hayes tells two young children they must travel down a river in a boat. She sternly warns them not to remove their blindfolds, or they will die. 5 years earlier, with Mallory, a pregnant artist, chatting with her sister Jessica. They don't pay much attention to the TV, which talks about people hurting themselves for no reason in faraway places. After their chat, they go to the hospital for Mallory's baby checkup, which goes well. But when they leave, they see a lady acting really strange and hurting her head on a window. Outside, everything is crazy. People are running, crashing cars, and hurting themselves. Mallory and Jessica get scared and rush to their car. But suddenly, Jessica's eyes turn weird, and she starts driving super fast. Mallory begs her to stop, but the car flips over. Luckily, both of them survive. Mallory gets out, but Jessica walks into the road and is hit by a truck. Mallory, scared and upset, runs with the crowd. There's chaos all around, with cars exploding and people screaming. A woman tries to help Mallory, but she suddenly starts talking to no one and steps into a burning car that explodes. Then, a man named Tom helps Mallory and takes her to a house where some other people are hiding. One man, Douglas, doesn't want to let them in, but the house owner, Greg, helps them. Inside, everyone tries to figure out what's going on. Some think it's monsters, but they all agree that if you look outside, something makes people want to hurt themselves. The TV shows this is happening everywhere before it stops working. To stay safe, they cover all the windows so no one can look outside. In the present, Mallory and two kids have been on a river for 6 hours. She tries to talk to people on a radio and keeps everyone covered with blankets. She has a box of birds that get scared when something bad is near. Mallory hears a strange voice calling her name, but tries to ignore it. Back in the past, the group hears a knock. It's a pregnant lady named Olympia, begging for help, and Douglas doesn't want to let more people into the house, but Mallory calls him mean, and they decide to let Olympia in. Mallory grabs a rifle just in case, and everyone closes their eyes until they're sure Olympia is safe. Greg offers to check the outside by watching his security cameras. They tie him to a chair in front of the monitors and leave him alone. Greg stares at the screens, and after a few minutes, his face changes. The group hears a strange noise, rushes into the room and finds that Greg has fallen and hit his head. He's gone. The group quickly destroys the screen. That night, Mallory can't sleep. As she walks around the house, she hears another strange sound, but it turns out to be Lucy and Felix spending time together. In the present, Mallory and the kids have been on the river for 14 hours when a man's voice tells her to take her blindfold off, saying it's safe and promising food. Mallory warns the kids not to listen and fires her gun blindly, but the man jumps onto the boat. The birds go crazy, making lots of noise. The man tries to take off Mallory's blindfold, saying the entity is beautiful, but Mallory fights him off. After a struggle, she kills him with a machete. Back in the past, the group is running out of food, and no help is coming. Mallory, Tom, Douglas, Lucy, and Charlie decide to go to the supermarket. They cover the car windows so they can't see outside and use GPS to guide them through the streets. They bump into abandoned cars and see lots of people who didn't make it. As they drive, the GPS shows something is near the car. They hear a whooshing sound, and the car shakes. Scared, they drive faster until they arrive at the supermarket. Inside, they cover all the windows and take off their blindfolds. The group gathers food and baby supplies. Mallory finds some birds and takes them along. Douglas thinks they should stay at the supermarket, but Mallory says that's heartless. They can't leave the others behind. Suddenly, they hear knocking on a door. Charlie recognizes the voice of a coworker stuck in the freezer, begging to be let out. The group isn't sure if they should trust him, so they open the door a little bit. The birds go crazy, showing the man isn't really Charlie's friend, but the entity. The man yells that they should see the entity and tries to force the door open, but Charlie tackles him back into the freezer, and they lock it again. Then, blood begins coming out from under the door, confirming Charlie is dead. The group leaves while still hearing the guy's voice begging for freedom. That night, the group hears a car engine and rushes into the garage, only to find that Lucy and Felix have taken their only vehicle and left. In the present, after 24 hours of non-stop rowing, Mallory takes a brief break but, too worried about the kids, starts rowing again. The boat suddenly hits a sunken truck, causing the boy to fall into the water. Mallory grabs him just before he drowns, but they lose their blanket and food in the process. Desperate, she warms the boy with a jacket and decides to stop at a nearby shore. She tells the children to stay still while she searches for supplies. Tying a string to the boat for guidance, she cautiously enters the forest and finds a building. Mallory gathers food and a blanket, but her string can't go much farther, so she ties it to the furniture and continues exploring. Suddenly, she hears a noise, sees the string trembling, and spots a shadow outside. Panicked, she rushes out, running through the forest as the entity whispers her name. Mallory fires her gun blindly, which the little girl hears. Disobeying orders, the girl leaves the boat to help. Fortunately, Mallory reaches her just in time, pulling her back to safety. Furious, she scolds the children, reminding them that if things get too dangerous, they must leave her behind. In the past, Olympia lets a stranger into the house without consulting the group. His name is Gary. After Tom checks him, Gary explains that only the insane can survive seeing the entity. He escaped a group of mental patients who force others to look at the entity, claiming it's beautiful. Douglas distrusts Gary and tries to kick him out at gunpoint, but Cheryl knocks Douglas out and locks him in the garage, allowing Gary to stay. In the present, Mallory and the kids have been on the river for 38 hours. She covers them with a blanket, warning that they're approaching the rapids, that the most dangerous part of the journey. Someone will need to open their eyes to steer. Both children volunteer, but Mallory remembers her promise to Olympia to protect her daughter, and she can't harm her own son either. In the end, she decides they'll risk it and go through the rapids blindfolded. In the past, both Mallory and Olympia go into labor at the same time. As Tom and Cheryl help them upstairs, Gary, who turns out to be one of the escaped mental patients, pulls out drawings of the creatures and begins creating a new one. He puts Mallory's birds in the fridge and tears the papers off the windows, actions that Douglas witnesses from a distance. Tom comes downstairs and finds Gary's disturbing drawings, but before he can react, Gary knocks him out. Gary opens the front garage door, trying to make Douglas see the entity, but Douglas quickly covers his eyes. Upstairs, Mallory and Olympia are both in labor and give birth to 2 healthy babies. Suddenly, Gary storms into the room, pulling the blinds open in front of Olympia. She falls under the entity's influence immediately. Mallory quickly grabs Olympia's baby before Olympia runs to the window and self-deletes. Gary then forces Cheryl to look outside, causing her to self-delete with scissors. As Mallory hides under a blanket with the 2 babies, Douglas arrives with a rifle and blindly fires, wounding Gary in the arm. However, Gary retaliates by attacking Douglas, pushing him through the railing and stabbing him with scissors. The rifle drops, and Gary and Tom both reach for it. The weapon goes off in the struggle, and Mallory hears 2 gunshots. Luckily, Tom emerges victorious. 5 years pass. Mallory and Tom live together, raising the children as a family. They've developed a system to keep themselves safe and use string to guide them on supply runs. One day, while Mallory is out scavenging, she hears cars nearby. She waits until they leave, then rushes back to tell Tom. They agree it's too dangerous to go out alone anymore. That night, they receive a radio transmission from a safe compound, offering food and shelter. The voice gives them instructions and warns that they'll need to see to navigate the rapids. Tom is eager to go, but Mallory suspects it's a trap and refuses. Later, while the family is out looking for supplies, they encounter the same cars. Tom decides to distract the drivers, giving Mallory and the kids a chance to escape. A group of crazed people demand Tom look at the entity. When they spot Mallory and the kids, Tom opens fire, taking down a few. But the group shoots back. In a desperate move to save his family, Tom removes his blindfold to aim more accurately. He quickly kills the remaining attackers, but after seeing the entity, he self-deletes. Devastated by Tom's death, Mallory decides they must head for the shelter. After 42 hours on the river, they approach the dangerous rapids. Mallory does her best to steer the boat, but it flips, sending everyone into the water. Mallory finds the boy in the river, while the girl reaches land, ringing a bell to guide her. Reunited, they continue their journey through the woods, where they hear the entity whispering to them in Tom's voice. Mallory tries to escape the entity's whispers, but she tumbles down a small hill. The voice pursues the kids, and the boy nearly removes his blindfold, but Mallory finds him just in time and stops him. However, the girl is still missing. Mallory begins apologizing for yelling at her, and hearing her mother's voice helps the girl find her way back. The family then follows the sound of birds, but when the entity surrounds them, they have to start running. They trip and fall a few times, but eventually reach the compound, where the door is opened just in time to save them from the entity. Once inside, they are checked and cleared to stay. They finally meet the voice from the radio and discover that the compound is a school for the blind, filled with survivors and birds that act as alarms. Safe at last, Mallory decides to give the kids names. She names the girl Olympia, after her mother, and the boy Tom, after her late partner. Mallory then opens her box, releasing the birds to join the others in their sanctuary. If you enjoyed this recap, Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video.